May 12, 1940. They've driven through the Ardennes, fought their way through the worst traffic jam in human history so far, and battled past brave French and Belgian resistance. Now Heinz Guderian's tankers and infantrymen bring themselves one step closer to their objective of crossing the Meuse and smashing through the French lines, for today they capture Sedan. I'm Indy Neidell. Welcome to our World War II miniseries 10 Days in Sedan, where we cover the German thrust through the Ardennes, the rage of the Reich, and the new confrontation between old enemies at Sedan, the crucible where the fate of the Axis and Allies converge. Join me as we explore the course of the battle and its aftermath. This morning, the Germans begin the short drive from the Semois River down to the Meuse. As I covered last time, overnight, the 1st Panzer Division, the central force of Heinz Guderian's 19th Panzer Corps, was able to seize an unguarded crossing over the Semois River near Meuse, and they have effected a crossing near Bouillon this morning. The 2nd Panzer Division to their west and the 10th to their east have also managed to get across the Semois. 2nd Panzer approaches from the northwest, heading for Donchery, west of Sedan. 1st Panzer will proceed directly towards Sedan itself, and 10th Panzer is heading down the roads east of Sedan. In front of them, the French 5th Light Cavalry withdraws this morning behind the French border and takes up defensive positions in a line of blockhouses screening the German advance. By now, Sedan's defenders are pretty aware of what's headed their way, and the heavy artillery of the 55th Division is bombarding the approaching Germans constantly, although so far they've failed to prevent the advance. The Germans make contact with the line of blockhouses around 11 a.m., and they prove to be difficult to clear of French troops. Sporadic fighting around these houses delays the German advance for several hours, while the artillery keeps hammering away. But by mid-afternoon, the garrisons are slowly but surely being picked off. The 5th Cavalry begins retreating south from Sedan and crosses the Meuse around 6 p.m. They do not stay there, though, and are almost immediately ordered to move to the western bank of the Ardennes Canal. Why? Well, by now, the French are really starting to react to the tide of panzers approaching Sedan and are envisioning a plug behind the Meuse River line to contain any breaches in the Sedan sector. Jean Flavigny's 21st Corps is assigned to Charles Hunziger's 2nd Army and begins moving towards Sedan to form the bulk of this plug. That might prove to be a wise move, since towards the end of the day, 1st and 10th Panzer Divisions converge on Sedan, and they take it. At least the part north of the Meuse. The French defenders by this point are gathered up on the south side, preparing to defend against the oncoming assault, which is still thought to be some days away. The Germans are moving more quickly than expected, however. Remember how I said a couple days ago the French planners thought it would take at least a week until the German troops reached the Meuse? Well, when forward elements of the 10th Panzer Division enter Sedan at around 10 p.m. today, they've done it in a mere 65 hours. Even so, now they've got to bring up artillery and bridging equipment before they can think about a crossing, right? So the French have plenty of time to bring more units in and bulk up their defenses, right? Wrong. See, French military planners are making these assumptions based on how long it would take their own forces to do it. There was no sense of urgency because at every echelon of command, the French generals were victims of what we now call mirror imaging. As General Joseph Dumont, commanding the GQG Reserve, wrote later, crediting the enemy with our own battle methods, we imagined that he would not attempt to cross the Meuse until he had brought up a considerable amount of artillery. The 5 or 6 days we thought he would need were to give us time to reinforce our own defenses. But Guderian knows what the French will try to do. He knows that this is exactly what the Maginot Line is for, to delay the enemy and concentrate forces. He believes the operation must be complete and the Meuse crossed by the 5th day of the offensive at the very latest, so basically by the end of May 14th. They've pulled out all the stops to keep on that tight schedule too, including methamphetamines. Yep. Graf von Kielmansegg, in his capacity as General Staff Officer in charge of the 1st Panzer Division supplies, his job was to bring along 20,000 tablets of pervitin. This doping preparation, to put it in modern language, was to be administered to the drivers during their grinding nighttime march movements through the Ardennes to keep them awake longer. Mental doping was much more effective. All soldiers, down to the very last assistant gunner, knew what was at stake. Above all, it had been drilled into them over and over again that every minute counted in the race to the Meuse River. Now, by the time Guderian's panzers do reach the Meuse, it seems probable that the bridges across the river at Sedan have been at least partially blown. Sources are a little light on whether or not this happened, but none I can find explicitly say they were not. It definitely makes more sense to assume that they are, though, for a number of reasons. Firstly, retreating French forces have blown bridges while retreating before, including at the Semois River the night before. It's not like they haven't been aware of the approaching panzers, as we've seen, so surprise isn't really much of an explanation. Would Guderian's troops really rush feverishly to the Meuse for the past 2.5 days just to stop dead on its northern bank if perfectly serviceable bridges were still intact? Seems unlikely. And in either case, the French are not lacking heavy guns or air support that they could call down to destroy the bridges. And I've been to Sedan, and when you physically look at the bridges, you can see in the stone that they've been blown and rebuilt. But either way, the Germans haven't messed around in getting to the Meuse, and they don't intend to stay here long before starting their assault either. The attack is planned for tomorrow. Actually, there's still arguments going on between Guderian and his superior Ewald von Kleist about this. Kleist wants to target a bridgehead line running from Noyers through Pont-Maugis and ending at Chehery, around 6 to 8 kilometers south of the Meuse. Guderian says no, this isn't deep enough. For one, Guderian's panzers are going to struggle to mass in such a small area. Worse, it's in range of the French heavy guns and vulnerable to counterattack. Instead, Guderian wants to push up to 20 kilometers past Sedan, up to the northern edge of Ston. This, he argues, would give enough room for his crossing troops while denying the French the possibility of massing there for a counterattack. Guderian seems intent on doing things his way, regardless of what anyone else thinks. I imagine we'll see how that works out for him in the days ahead. Elsewhere on the front, troops of Hermann Holtz's 15th Corps begin crossing the Meuse tonight around Hou and Dinant. At around 11 p.m., recon troops from Max von Hartlieb's 5th Panzer Division find an unguarded crossing point near Hou and begin to send some foot soldiers across to carve out a bridgehead. This is not an ideal crossing point, though, and when the French find out what's happening, things get hot real quick. French troops begin arriving to guard the crossing and find the German bridgehead. They lay down machine gun fire and call in their heavy guns, making further crossings difficult. Hartlieb is not giving up, though, and means to reinforce his bridgehead tomorrow. Erwin Rommel's 7th Panzer Division also reaches the Meuse at Dinant, but finds the bridges were blown moments before their arrival. They'll have to wait until tomorrow to attack as well, although their path is even more deadly than Hartlieb's. French machine guns overlook the crossing area, and artillery observers have a clear line of sight to what Rommel is doing. Even with these odds stacked against them, if they can get across the river in rapid fashion, they may find the battle on the opposite bank favorable to them, because French units are still getting into position. The GQG expected that it would take Korap's army 5 days to reach the Meuse and dig in. Although parts of Korap's divisions had reached the Meuse by the evening of the 11th of May, many units were still in transit, particularly the horse-drawn artillery, anti-tank, and support units. In particular, the 18th DI, a Reserve A division, were assigned to cover a 20-kilometer wide section of the Meuse between Hou and Dinant, but only had 5 of its 9 infantry battalions and 2/3 of its artillery in place by the evening of the 12th of May. Furthermore, the 18th DI was woefully ill-equipped in support weapons, with no divisional anti-tank company, only 3 25mm anti-tank guns per infantry regiment, and none of its authorized Gaume mortars. However, the Germans haven't had the time to bring their own guns up in force, so the French artillery superiority could be a real problem here for Rommel, especially if the Luftwaffe can't provide enough support from above. Finally, Hans-Georg von Reinhardt's 41st Motorized Corps has made slower progress because of the massive traffic jams in the Ardennes. But still, by the end of the day today, the leading elements of his 6th Panzer Division are closing in on Monthermé. The 6th Panzer's commander, Werner Kempf, will also be looking to cross the Meuse tomorrow. The French defenses here will prove very stiff indeed. Speaking of the Luftwaffe, what have the air forces been up to, actually? Well, Unfortunately for Rommel, a lack of support is exactly what he can expect from the Luftwaffe tomorrow. They're preparing to support the attack at Sedan with maximum effort. They're also still operating heavily around the approach through the Ardennes, pouncing on Allied recon aircraft and bombers. In fact, those Allied recon planes find something odd today. Kilometer after kilometer of cars, tanks, trucks, motorcycles stretching all the way north back into Germany and up to the Rhine. What they found is a colossal traffic jam caused by roads cratered by artillery, blown bridges, barriers, and other delays. This traffic jam has basically brought the troops of the 41st Panzer Corps under Deinhard to a standstill. In some cases, it's not even the French that have caused these delays, but German units stepping on each other's toes during the advance. When Generalmajor Werner Kempf's 6th Panzer Division finally crossed the Belgian frontier, angling onto Guderian's right wing, as the 6th Panzer Division's war diary relates, the division was forced apart during the advance by elements of the 2nd Panzer Division, as well as the 16th, 23rd, and 24th Infantry Divisions, which slipped in between our formations. In the afternoon and evening, there was no longer any clear picture as to where the march movement groups and the individual formations were located. The colossal traffic jam is visible to Allied planes even at night, since many crews have forgotten to black out their lights. So the roads through the Ardennes are lit up like Christmas trees. Despite this, the Allies failed to make use of the opportunity to strike at the rows of trapped panzers. Reports are slow to make it up the chain because of the bureaucratic French Air Command, and when they finally do arrive, they're treated mostly with skepticism and disbelief. Allied planners, especially when it comes to aerial warfare, are fixated on Belgium, and aerial support earmarked for Sedan has already been transferred up there. They're missing a hell of an opportunity, and one that has been spelled out for them by their own recon. That oversight will come back to bite the Allies very hard, for tomorrow Heinz Guderian will launch his crossing of the Meuse at Sedan, but you will have to wait until next week, for my coverage of this campaign, at least for today, is over. Next time, we will cover everything that happens at Sedan on May 13th, as the fate of the city, its defenders, perhaps even France itself, hangs in the balance. The fixed defenses here at Sedan may be somewhat of a lesser weight here than elsewhere along the line, but they are without doubt formidable obstacles, not to mention that the waters of the Meuse itself are playing their part in holding back the armored tide. Can Guderian's men overcome these defenses, both natural and man-made? Will the Allies get their act together and wake up to the danger here at Sedan? And what about Hoth and Reinhardt's men further north? Join us next time to find out. I got a feeling those French troops will fight hard to hold the line at Sedan. You too can fight hard to hold the line. We're not, shipping anyone to the front, but you can join us in the fight for real history. Join us at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. Our Ardennes Amigo of the Week is Mel Blunt, and these are our newly commissioned officers. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.